As a beginner kitesurfer, it can be confusing to know whether you can park your kite at 12 or not. You will hear it said that you must never park a kite at 12. But, on the other hand, generally, a kite can park at 12 all day long with minimal steering input. And you will see many kiters taking advantage of this fact. The reality is sometimes you can park at 12 and sometimes you can't. This video explains more. Firstly, the main issue with parking a kite at 12 is what happens when the kite drops. If a kite drops from 12 o'clock, there are a number of issues. Since the kite drops towards you, you get a lot of slack in your lines immediately, and that means you can't control the kite. Then the kite will drop with gravity and may drift with the breeze an uncertain amount, so you can't tell exactly what path it will take. The kite might just drift backwards a little before returning to the wind window, at which point your lines are straight and you regain control. Or the kite could drop more and drift to high power. Or the kite could drop to the surface and start tumbling downwind. When a kite drops that's parked to your side around 45 degrees or so, there's typically less chaos. You don't get as much slack in the lines. Plus, the kite will return to the wind window with only a short downwind drift. In other words, the lines will become straight much sooner. So if the kite is liable to drop, then it's preferable to have the kite to the side around 45 degrees. But in most situations, a kite should be stable at 12. These days, it's mostly wind speed and wind quality that determine whether a kite is stable parked at 12. The slower the wind or airflow, the less lift the kite generates. Once the wind is too slow, the kite's lift can easily be less than its own weight. When that happens, the kite drops. This can also happen in gusty wind. In gusty wind, the kite's lift fluctuates and might easily drop below the weight of the kite. Fortunately, with experience, you can feel whether a kite is liable to drop. A kite parked at 12 should lift its own weight first, then any additional lift it generates becomes line tension. So, in your line tension, you're effectively feeling how much lift a kite has in excess of its own weight. If you can feel plenty of line tension, and that tension is not varying much, then you know a kite is easily and consistently lifting itself. You can then park the kite at 12 without issues. If the line tension you feel is very low, then you know the wind is light and the kite is only just lifting its own weight. And that means there is an imminent risk of the kite dropping. Or if the tension you feel is changing a lot, then you know the wind is gusty and again there's a high risk of the kite dropping. Of course, you can use kite control to manage the kite's lift. If the lift you feel is slightly low, then bringing in the bar is usually enough to increase lift and keep the kite in the air. If the kite needs more lift, you may want to steer a little, especially when the kite's near 12. The faster you steer, the more you will increase line tension, and the less likely it is that the kite will drop during a lull. In really dodgy conditions, you may need to be more dynamic and avoid sitting the kite still. There is much more about keeping a kite in the air in the light wind and gusty wind tutorials and in the stalling tutorials. As I said, these days wind is the main issue. In the past, kite design or the immaturity of kite design played a big part. My modern kites will stay in the air even in fairly gusty wind, and only drop when there is very light wind or holes in the wind. Even this Rebel kite, which is specifically designed for lift and not stability, behaves well in moderate gusts. whereas some of my old kites could not be parked even in clean wind. My old Octane, for example, needed to be steered at all times to keep it in the air. These days, most kiters will have stable kites, plus most kiters specifically find a location with clean wind, and therefore for most sessions parking a kite at 12 is usually fine when needed. And if you can park a kite at 12, it can be very convenient. A kite parked at 12 requires the least steering input. This can make kitesurfing much easier, and it makes learning to kitesurf much easier. Of course, there are plenty of ways to make a kite drop, such as descending from a jump, or sitting down very quickly when the wind is light. We've mostly talked about light wind issues related to parking a kite at 12, but there's also an issue in stronger wind, especially strong gusty wind. If your kite is at 12 during a gust, its lift may near or exceed your own weight. You will then slide or get lofted downwind, which then often makes the kite jump around or fall out of the sky. With the kite lower, when a strong gust hits you, you slide towards the kite, which dissipates the energy from the gust, stops you getting airborne, and reduces how much the kite jumps around. I only mention this right at the end because, as a beginner or intermediate, you should not be out in conditions where a parked kite has the power to drag or lift you, so you should be avoiding that situation anyway. Thanks for watching and safe kiting to you all.